when one of the most famous men on the planet sat down on a cold, wet sidewalk in New York City, soaked to the bone, holding a cardboard sign that said, "Need help." Not a single person stopped. Not the man in the suit rushing past with his umbrella. Not the teenagers laughing too loud to notice. Not the delivery driver. Not the couple running through the rain. Not one of the 416 people who walked right past him that night on West 72nd Street. 416 people, and every single one of them kept walking. Now here is the part that will stop you cold. The one person who finally stopped, the 417th, was a 26-year-old woman named Mara. She was walking alone in the rain that night, heartbroken and lost, carrying an unopened envelope in her bag that she was too afraid to read. That envelope contained the news that she had just inherited $3 million from her grandmother. A grandmother who had died 6 weeks earlier? A grandmother who, it turned out, had a secret she had never told a single soul. A secret that connected her directly, impossibly, across 21 years to the soaking wet man sitting on those steps. What happened when Mara sat down beside him that night will change the way you see kindness, grief, and the invisible threads that connect strangers forever. And the cliffhanger, the secret hiding underneath all of it, the one Mara doesn't discover until she opens a handwritten letter right there in the rain, is something nobody saw coming. Stay with us for the whole video, because the most important part of this story is not who the man on the steps was. Yet it is what one ordinary woman did for him, 21 years ago, without ever asking for a single thing in return. And how that one decision, made on a park bench on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, changed the lives of over 200 families, built a foundation that carries a dead woman's name on its wall, and led two broken strangers to a wet stone step on a November night in New York City, where one of them was waiting and one of them was finally ready to stop. The rain came hard that night. It fell on West 72nd Street in New York City like someone had tipped a giant bucket over the whole sky. It hit the yellow cabs. It hit the hot dog carts sitting cold and closed on the curb. It soaked the pigeons huddled on the ledges and made them look furious. And it ran down the old stone walls of the Dakota Building, the famous dark apartment tower where John Lennon once lived, and where, on a December night in 1980, the world lost him forever. And it pooled in the cracks of the sidewalk below. Most people ran. They pulled their coats over their heads. They ducked into doorways. They clutched their phones tighter inside their pockets and walked faster, eyes down, shoes smacking through puddles. A woman in a red raincoat jogged past holding a folder over her head. Two men in suits shared one umbrella and argued about whose turn it was to hold it. A teenager in a hoodie pressed herself flat against a building wall, scrolling her phone like the rain wasn't even happening. Nobody looked up. Nobody looked across the street. If they had, they would have seen him. Then he was sitting on the low stone steps of a building directly across from the park. He wore a dark jacket, the kind with no logo, no flash, nothing special about it. His hair was black and wet, pressed flat against his forehead. His jeans were soaked through to the skin. He had been sitting in that exact spot for over an hour, and in all that time, he had not moved once. He did not pull out a phone. He did not adjust his jacket. He did not look for shelter. He sat perfectly still while the rain turned the whole city gray around him, like a man who had made a decision and was no longer afraid of it. In his hands, he held a piece of cardboard. The cardboard was going soft at the edges from the water. The letters, written thick in black marker, were beginning to bleed and smear at the corners. But you could still read them clearly. 3 words, written big and plain and without decoration. Need help. That was all. No explanation, no backstory, no name, no arrow, no cup held out for coins. Just those 2 words sitting in his wet hands while the rain fell, and the city moved around him like a river moving around a stone. Hundreds of people passed him in that hour, men in business suits with expensive shoes now ruined by the wet. Women walking fast with grocery bags. A couple running and laughing, sharing a jacket over their heads. A group of teenage boys taking up the whole sidewalk, too busy being loud to notice anything outside their circle. A delivery driver on a bicycle, head down, pushing hard against the weather. A woman in scrubs who had clearly just finished a long shift and wanted nothing more than to get home. Not one of them stopped. Not one turned to look twice. The man on the steps watched every single one of them go. His dark eyes moved slowly, face to face to face, the way a person watches a river when they are thinking about something very large. He was not angry. There was no bitterness pulling at the corners of his mouth. His face was quiet, settled, like someone who had already accepted a hard truth about the world and was simply waiting to be proven wrong. If anyone had really looked closely without the blur of rain and hurry between them, they might have stopped for a different reason entirely. They might have grabbed the arm of the person next to them. They might have said, "Wait, look, is that—" But nobody looked closely, because it was raining, because New York City never slows down for anything, because the mind does a peculiar thing when it almost recognizes someone famous in an ordinary place. It decides it must be wrong and moves on before the thought can finish itself. So the man sat. The rain fell, and the city walked past. His name was Keanu Reeves. He was at that moment in November 2019, one of the most recognized faces on the planet. He had outrun a bomb on a speeding bus in speed. He had surfed 50-foot waves and robbed banks in Point Break. He had bent bullets and stopped time in The Matrix. His face had been on posters in bedrooms in 40 countries. In less than 6 months, theaters would explode with crowds coming to see him in John Wick Chapter 3. He had more money than he could count and more fans than he could ever meet. He had a home in Los Angeles waiting for him, and on this wet and cold Tuesday evening on West 72nd Street in Manhattan, he was sitting on stone steps, soaked to the bone, holding a cardboard sign, watching strangers walk past. Not because he was lost, not because he was broken, because he was looking for an answer to a question that had been living inside him for a very long time. He had almost stopped believing the answer existed. He did not know that 417 steps away, a young woman named Mara Solano was walking toward him through the rain, her grandmother's unopened letter burning a hole in her bag, and that she was about to change everything. For both of them. Mara Solano had been having the worst week of her life. That might sound strange because earlier that same day at exactly 2:17 in the afternoon, a lawyer named Gerald Fitch had called her into his office on Park Avenue, a corner office on the 14th floor with a view of the Helmsley building and a bowl of mints on the desk that nobody ever touched, and told her that she had inherited a significant amount of money. Not a little money. Not a savings bond or a piece of jewelry or a car. $3,200,000. That is a number so large that when Gerald Fitch said it out loud, across his wide, clean desk, Mara heard it wrong. She thought he said 32,000. She nodded politely. He looked at her the way people look at someone who has missed the point entirely, and he said it again, slower this time, with a pause between each word. She asked him to write it down. He wrote it on a yellow legal pad and turned it toward her. She stared at those numbers for a long time without blinking. She did not feel happy. She did not feel relieved or lucky or any of the things you might expect a 26-year-old woman to feel upon learning she would never have to worry about rent again. She felt hollow, like someone had reached into her chest and scooped out everything warm, because the money had belonged to her grandmother, and her grandmother, Rosario Solano, was gone. She had died 6 weeks ago. Quietly. In her small apartment on Cypress Avenue in the Bronx, in the bedroom with the blue curtains and the crucifix above the headboard, and the photograph of Mara at age 7 on the nightstand. She was 81 years old. She had been small and sturdy and fierce in the way that only certain women are. Women who have carried enormous things for so long that the weight becomes invisible, becomes just the shape of them. She smelled like lavender soap and old books. She said the rosary every night and burned her toast every morning, and called Mara Maha like the word was its own complete sentence. She was the only person in the world who had always, without condition, without pause, believed in Mara completely. Mara's parents had not stayed. Her father left when she was 4. A Tuesday morning, no note, just an empty hook where his jacket used to hang. Her mother lasted one more year before she disappeared too, quietly and without drama, like a light someone forgets to turn back on. Mara remembered neither of them clearly. What she remembered was Rosario, stepping in without being asked, without complaining, without ever once making Mara feel like a burden that had been placed on her. Rosario worked two jobs: days at a laundromat on Willis Avenue, nights cleaning offices downtown, coming home at midnight smelling like bleach and floor wax, her feet sore, her hands rough. And still, she would heat milk on the stove and sit with Mara at the kitchen table and ask about her day. She helped with homework she barely understood. She braided Mara's hair on Sunday mornings while the radio played. She came to every school play, every graduation, every small and large moment, sitting in the front row in her good blouse with her hands folded and her face full of a pride so enormous it embarrassed Mara when she was young and devastated her now. Every single night before Mara fell asleep, Aunt Rosario said the same thing. "You are going to do something important with your life, Mija. I can feel it in my bones." Where had Rosario gotten $3 million? That was the question that had been crawling through Mara's mind since the moment Gerald Fitch said the number out loud. Rosario had worked in a laundromat. She had cleaned offices. She had shopped at the discount grocery store and worn the same winter coat for 11 years and cut coupons from the Sunday Circular every week without fail. The math did not work. Gerald Fitch had handed Mara a sealed envelope before she left. He said, "Your grandmother left very specific instructions. She said you would have questions. She said everything you need is inside." Mara had taken the envelope. She had not opened it. It sat in her bag right now, and pressed between her wallet and a paperback she had not read in 3 weeks. And every few minutes she was aware of it, the way you are aware of a sound you cannot quite identify, constantly underneath everything else. She was afraid of what it would say. She was more afraid that reading it would make Rosario's absence more real than it already was. That the words would be the last of her. That once Mara read them, that would be all there was left. So instead she walked. She had been walking for 40 minutes through the rain on Central Park West, heading nowhere in particular, hood pulled up, hands in her pockets. She was not thinking about where she was going. She was thinking about Rosario, about all the nights her grandmother came home tired and still sat down, about the lavender soap, about the braided hair, about the way Rosario always looked at Mara like she was the most important thing in any room. She almost walked straight past him. She was 3 steps from the corner, just about to turn, when something stopped her. She could not explain it afterward. There was no loud noise, no sudden movement. Just a quiet pull like a hand on her sleeve, like someone tapping her shoulder from the inside. She looked up. She saw the man on the steps, wet through, completely still, holding the cardboard sign. Her first thought was the thought of someone who is sad and tired and carrying too much. Keep walking. You can barely hold yourself up tonight. You have nothing left to give. Her second thought arrived in her grandmother's voice, clear as anything, the way Rosario's voice had been arriving in her head every day for 6 weeks. The day you stop seeing other people's pain is the day you start losing yourself, Mija. Mara stopped. She stood in the rain and she looked at the man. Not a glance. A real look. She took in the wet jacket, the still hands, the sign going soft in the rain. She took in his face and the dark eyes, the quiet in them, the way he was watching her, the way someone watches who has already decided they know how this ends. Like he had already decided she would walk away. Something about that, about being expected to leave before she had even made a choice, moved something stubborn and warm inside her chest. She took one step toward him, then another. Then she was standing directly in front of him, rain falling between them like a beaded curtain, and she said the only 6 words that came, "Hey, are you okay out here?" He looked up at her slowly. Not the way a person looks up when they are startled. The way a person looks up when they have been waiting so long for something that when it finally arrives, they need a moment to trust that it is real. His eyes moved over her face. Careful, steady, not strange or unsettling. Just the look of someone making sure they are not imagining things. The rain fell between them and neither of them moved. Then he said, "I'm okay." He paused. "Are you?" Mara blinked. The question landed sideways, like something coming from a direction she hadn't expected. I... What? I'm asking about you." "I know," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that didn't need to push to be heard. "I'm asking about you too." She stared at him. Yet in all the years Mara had stopped to check on people, and Rosario had raised her to stop, to always stop, nobody had ever turned the question around that fast. People who needed help usually took the help. They didn't immediately look back at you like you might be the one who needed something. "Can I sit?" she asked. The question surprised her as it came out. She hadn't planned it. He shifted slightly on the step, making room without making a big gesture of it. She sat. The cold came through her jeans in about 4 seconds flat. The stone was hard and soaking wet and deeply uncomfortable. She did not get up. Something about the discomfort felt right. Felt like proof that she was actually here, actually doing this instead of turning a corner and disappearing into her own sadness. They sat without talking for a moment, and just two people in the rain watching the street. A taxi went by too fast and threw a small wave of water onto the curb. Somewhere above them, wind moved through the trees in Central Park, and the branches made a sound like distant applause. "The sign," Mara said finally. She nodded at the cardboard in his hands. "What kind of help do you need?" He looked down at the sign, his hands shifted slightly on the edges of it. "It's not for me," he said. "What do you mean?" He was quiet for a beat. Not the quiet of someone avoiding the question. The quiet of someone choosing the right words carefully, the way you choose your footing on wet ground. "There was a man," he said. "His name was Douglas. He was a veteran. He used to sleep near these steps. Had a regular spot, just along there." He tilted his head slightly toward the far end of the building. "He had a sign a lot like this one. Sat out here in all kinds of weather." He paused. "One night, about 2 years ago, I walked past him. He asked me for help, so I stopped." "What kind of help did he need?" "That night, just someone to talk to." He looked at the street. "We sat out here for almost 3 hours. He told me about his unit, about Fallujah, about coming home and finding out that home wasn't the same place he'd left." His voice stayed even throughout all of this, but something behind his eyes moved and tightened. He was smart. Funny, actually. He did impressions of his commanding officers that made me laugh harder than I had in a long time. Mara watched his face while he talked. 3 weeks ago," he continued, "I came by and he was gone. No sign, no blanket, nothing. I've asked around. Nobody knows where he went." He turned the soggy cardboard over once in his hands. "I've been coming back every few nights to check, and while I'm here, I thought—" He stopped, almost smiled. "I thought I'd see." "See what?" Mara asked, though she already half knew. "Whether anyone would stop." He looked out at the stream of people moving past in the rain. "Whether anyone would notice." Something shifted in Mara's chest, something heavy and tender at the same time. "How long have you been out here tonight?" she asked. "A little over an hour." "And how many people walked past?" He turned and looked at her sideways. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but the shape of one beginning. You were 417, he said. Mara stared at him. "You counted?" "I had time." She laughed. She had not laughed in 6 weeks. Not since before Rosario died, since before the hospital and the phone calls and the funeral with the white flowers and the folded hands. The laugh came out before she could stop it. Short and surprised and a little ragged around the edges, like something that had been stuck and suddenly came loose. He smiled then. A real one. And that was the moment it happened. Something in the lines of his face, the specific arrangement of his features in that unguarded half-smile, it clicked. The way a lock clicks when the right key finally finds it. Her brain, which had been carefully not looking too hard, suddenly looked all the way. Oh, she thought. The word moved through her like a current. Oh, oh no. Oh. She knew exactly who was sitting beside her on these wet stone steps in a soaked, dark jacket holding a ruined piece of cardboard. She kept it completely off her face. It took every bit of self-control she had, which right now was not very much. But something deep and instinctive told her, with absolute certainty, that if she let it show, if she let this become a "your famous" moment, the whole thing would shatter. It would stop being two people sitting in the rain. It would become something performed, something smaller, something that belonged to the world instead of just to right now. So she kept the knowledge inside, folded it up quietly, and put it away. And instead she said the only true thing she had. I stopped because my grandmother's voice told me to. He turned to look at her fully. His eyes were dark and still and genuinely interested in the way that very few people's eyes are genuinely interested. Not politely, not performatively, but the way someone looks when they actually want to know what comes next. Tell me about her, he said. So she did. She told him about Rosario, about the lavender soap in the Bronx and the two jobs, about the laundromat on Willis Avenue and the office cleaning downtown and the midnight walks home and the warm drink waiting on the stove. She told him about the braided hair on Sunday mornings and the school plays and the front row seat, and the good blouse worn to every occasion large and small. She told him about the way Rosario said Maija, like the word was a whole embrace folded into 4 letters. She told him about the lawyer's office, about Gerald Fitch and the yellow legal pad, and the number that didn't make any sense. About the envelope in her bag that she had been too afraid to open all afternoon. She talked for a long time. The rain softened while she spoke. It didn't stop, but it eased, pulling back from a downpour to something quieter, more like the sky leaning in to listen. When she finally went quiet, he sat with everything she had said for a long moment. He did not rush to fill the silence. He let it sit, the way you let something important sit, so it can settle properly. Then he said, "She sounds like someone who changed the world by being kind to one person at a time." Mara felt the tears arrive before she even knew they were on their way. "Yeah," she said. Her voice came out rough and small. She was. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only exists between two people who have, without planning it, said something real to each other. The kind that feels less like an absence of words and more like a space where words have been and left something behind. Mara wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her wrist. She was not embarrassed exactly, but she was surprised at herself. She had cried plenty in the past 6 weeks. In the shower, in the car, once very suddenly in the cereal aisle of a grocery store when she saw the brand Rosario always bought. But this felt different. This felt like crying in front of someone who understood the specific weight of what she was carrying, even without knowing all the details. She looked at him. He was staring out at the street. His jaw was set, not hard but thoughtful. Even his eyes had gone somewhere distant. Somewhere behind the rain and the cabs and the lit windows of the buildings across the way. "You know what that feels like," she said. It was not a question. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. He did not say anything else for a while. And then, slowly, the way things come out when it is late and raining and there is nothing left to protect, he began to talk. He told her he knew what it felt like to lose people. He did not give her his name. He still had not given her his name. But he began to offer her pieces of himself, quietly one at a time, the way you offer pieces of bread to something you are not sure yet will take them gently. He told her about a friend, his closest friend, he said. He did not say the name out loud, not but his voice changed shape around the absence of it the way a river changes shape around a rock. Anyone who knew anything would have known. River Phoenix, 23 years old. Halloween night, October 31st, 1993, on the sidewalk outside the Viper Room on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. One of the most blazingly talented people of his generation, gone before he had finished becoming who he was going to be. I was there that night, he said. Not inside the club, outside. I heard what was happening and I couldn't move. I stood on the street and I couldn't make my legs do anything useful. He paused. I've thought about that a lot over the years. That feeling of standing still when everything is falling. Mara did not say anything. She understood that he did not need her to. People talk about grief like it's a storm, he said. Like it comes in hard and then eventually it passes and the sun comes back. But some grief isn't a storm. He turned the soggy cardboard over slowly in his hands. Some grief is just weather. It's always there. Some days it's so quiet you almost forget it. And then some days it's all you can feel, and you can't remember what the other days were like. He told her about his daughter. He said it plainly, without flinching. The way people say things they have had to learn to say out loud because keeping them silent became too heavy. He said, I had a daughter. She was born still. December 24th, 1999. Christmas Eve. Mara pressed her lips together. I held her, he said. They let me hold her for a little while. She was perfect. Every part of her was exactly right. His voice did not break, but it thinned. It became something quieter and more careful, the way a person walks when the ground beneath them is fragile. She just wasn't here. She was perfect, and she just wasn't here. He told her about the woman he loved, the one who had been beside him through the grief of the baby, who had carried her own version of that grief every day. Her name was Jennifer. She died alone in a car on Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles on April 2nd, 2001. She had been driving at night, and then she wasn't anymore. She was 28 years old. We were both so broken after losing the baby, he said. And then she was gone too. And I remember thinking, I actually remember the exact thought. I remember thinking, is this just what my life is now? Is this who I am? The person things happen to? Mara felt something ache in a place she didn't have a name for. Yeah, what did you do? She asked. He almost smiled, but it was a sad shape. I kept going, which sounds small but didn't feel small. Some mornings keeping going was the whole achievement for the day. He told her about the years after, the ones he described as feeling like an empty building. His exact words. I had everything the world said should make a person happy, and I felt like an empty building. Lights on in all the windows. Nobody home inside. Mara thought about her own apartment on those nights after Rosario died. The lights she kept leaving on in every room because the dark felt too complete. What changed? She asked. He thought about it carefully. She could see him thinking, not performing thought, actually doing it. Someone was kind to me, he said, in a way that didn't want anything back. They didn't know who I was. Or if they did, they decided it didn't matter. They just saw a man sitting by himself and they sat down and they talked to me like I was only a person. Not a name, not a face they recognized. Just a person who needed someone to sit next to them for a while. Mara felt something shift. Where? She asked. Where were you? New York, he said. This city, near the park. He paused. A long time ago now. Who was it? Her voice had dropped without her meaning it to. Almost a whisper. He was quiet for what felt like a full minute. A bus rolled by on Central Park West, its windows yellow and blurred with condensation. A man walked past in a hard hat, not running, not caring about the rain, just walking through it like it was nothing. Then he said, an older woman. She was small. She sat down without asking if I minded. She smelled like soap. Clean soap, like lavender or something close to it. The air went out of Mara's lungs. Quietly. Completely. Like someone had pressed gently on her chest. What did she say to you? The question came out barely above a breath. He turned to look at the rain-soaked street, and his voice when it came was careful and soft, like he was carrying the words across a long distance without wanting to spill them. She said, You look like you need someone to sit with you for a little while. I've got time. He shook his head slowly. Just that. Nothing complicated. She sat with me for maybe 40 minutes. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, a movie she had seen, some pigeons that were bothering her. And when she stood up to leave, she put her hand on my arm for just a second, and she said, he stopped, that he looked at Mara directly. She said, I hope the world feels a little lighter tomorrow. Mara's hands were shaking. She looked down at them in her lap, both hands trembling like leaves, like they had received news that the rest of her body hadn't processed yet. Did she tell you her name? Mara whispered. Yes, he said, before she walked away. She turned back and said it like she wanted to make sure I had it, like it mattered that I knew. What was it? He looked at her. Rosario, he said. The rain stopped. Not gradually. All at once, like a single decisive breath being held. The street glistened suddenly under the streetlights. The gold reflection stretched long and trembling in the wet pavement. Somewhere close, a car alarm chirped twice and went silent. The city, for just one impossible second, seemed to pause with them. Yet Mara could not speak. She opened her mouth. The words were not there. He was watching her face, and she could see the understanding arriving in his eyes. Slow and then all at once, the same way the rain had stopped. He was putting it together. She could see exactly the moment he finished. What is your name? He asked. Very quietly. Very carefully. She swallowed hard. Mara, she said. Mara Solano. He closed his eyes. He kept them closed for a long time. Not in a dramatic way. In the way that a person closes their eyes when something lands so squarely in the center of them that they need a moment before they can look at the world again. His hands were still in his lap. The ruined cardboard sign rested against his knee. The wet city glittered quietly around them both. Mara watched him and did not say a word. She was not sure she could have said a word even if she had wanted to. Her whole body felt like it was vibrating at a frequency just below sound. Her hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs to steady them, and stared at the gold reflection stretching across the wet pavement, and tried to breathe the way Rosario had taught her to breathe when things got to be too big. In through the nose, mija. Count to 4, out through the mouth. Slow, like you have all the time in the world. She counted. She breathed. She waited. When he opened his eyes, they were bright. Not wet exactly, just bright. The way eyes get when something has moved through them that was too large to pass without leaving a mark. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wet city breathed around them. Somewhere in the park, an owl called once and went quiet. A couple walked past sharing one umbrella, laughing about something private, completely unaware that two people were sitting on stone steps beside them in the middle of something enormous. Life kept going. It always does, even when everything inside you has gone completely still. My grandmother, Mara said finally. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. The woman who sat with you on that bench. Yes, he said. The single word was very quiet, very certain. She never told me that story, Mara said. He nodded slowly. Some people do their kindest things in silence, he said. They don't need anyone to know. The doing of it is enough for them. Mara's hand moved to her bag without her consciously deciding to move it. Her fingers found the envelope immediately, the way fingers always find the thing they have been most aware of all day. She pulled it out and held it in both hands. It looked smaller outside than it had felt inside her bag. Just a plain white envelope, slightly bent at one corner. Her name on the front and Rosario's in a careful, old-fashioned cursive. The handwriting that had signed permission slips and birthday cards and grocery lists and notes tucked into school lunches for 18 years. Mara. Mi amor. She had been carrying it for hours. She had been afraid of it for hours. She was still afraid. But sitting here on these cold, wet steps, next to this man who had just spoken her grandmother's name in the dark, like it was something sacred. The fear felt different now, smaller, like something she could hold instead of something holding her. She looked at the envelope for a long moment, and then she broke the seal. Inside were two things. The first was a letter, 4 pages, front and back, covered completely in Rosario's handwriting. That careful, unhurried cursive that never changed from the time Mara was small to the very last birthday card 3 years ago. The pen had pressed firmly into the paper. Every letter was deliberate. This was not a letter written quickly. This was a letter written the way you write something you have been composing in your head for a very long time. The second was a smaller envelope, crisp and official with a gold embossed return address in the upper left corner, from a legal foundation Mara did not recognize. It was sealed. She set the smaller envelope on her knee. She unfolded the letter, and she read, "My dear Mara, if you are reading this, Gerald has already told you the number. I know your face when you don't understand something. You go very still and you stop blinking. And I imagine that is the face you made in his office today. I am sorry I was not there to see it. I would have laughed, Mija, and then I would have held your hand. You have questions. You have always had questions. Since you were 3 years old and asked me why the sky was blue, and I told you, and you said, but why blue and not green? You have always dug deeper than the first answer. That is one of my favorite things about you. It is also, I will admit, one of the most exhausting. So let me give you the deeper answer. In the spring of 2002, on one of my afternoons off from the laundromat, I took the train to Manhattan and walked to Central Park, because I needed air and because the Bronx felt very small that day. And I sat on a bench near the reservoir where the joggers go and the dogs run loose on Sunday mornings. There was a young man sitting at the other end of the bench. He was very sad. I could see it the way you see weather coming. In the set of the shoulders, in the way the eyes go somewhere far away. I know that kind of sadness because I have worn it. The sadness that comes from losing someone you were not ready to lose. I sat with him. We talked for perhaps 40 minutes about nothing important. The pigeons, the weather, a film I had seen. When I stood to leave, I told him my name and my neighborhood. In the old days, you always told someone where you were from. It made you real to each other. I forgot about it. Life went on the way life does. 3 months later, a lawyer called me, and he said an anonymous donor wanted to establish a fund in my name, for my family, because someone wanted to honor a woman who had shown him that kindness still existed in the world. I did not know what to say. The lawyer said, "The donor asked me to tell you, I hope the world feels a little lighter." I knew immediately. I never told you, Mija, because I did not want you to feel that our life together was built on charity. It was not charity. It was a circle. Kindness given, kindness returned. That is not charity. That is simply how the world is supposed to work, when people let it. I want you to use this money to continue the circle, not to be comfortable, to be useful. There is a difference, and you already know which one matters. I love you more than all the rain in New York City. All my love. Every single bit of it. Rosario Mara lowered the letter. Her hands were shaking so badly that the pages rattled softly in the quiet air like something trying to speak in a language made entirely of trembling. She looked at the man sitting beside her. He was looking at his own hands resting open in his lap. He had understood before she finished reading. She could tell by the stillness of him. The specific stillness of someone who has just had something confirmed that they had carried as a private hope for a very long time, not quite daring to believe it was real. "It was you," Mara said. Her voice was barely sound. "The money, the fund, the lawyer who wouldn't say the name." She swallowed. "All these years, it was you." He didn't answer right away. When he did, and his voice was low and steady and without any trace of wanting credit for what he was about to say. "Her kindness was worth more than any amount of money," he said. "I only wanted to make sure she never had to worry." Mara pressed the letter against her chest with both hands, like she was trying to keep it inside her. Like the words on those 4 pages were something she needed to absorb through her skin. She was crying. She did not hide it, and she was not embarrassed by it. The crying felt necessary. It felt like something that had been sealed up under enormous pressure for 6 weeks was finally, gently being allowed out. She never knew it was you, Mara said through the tears. No. You never told her. No. He was quiet for a moment. The city hummed around them. She didn't need to know. That wasn't the point of it. Mara looked at him. This man in a soaked, dark jacket on a cold stone step, who had sat in the rain for over an hour holding a cardboard sign, while 416 people walked past. What was the point of it? She asked. He looked back at her. The same point as everything, he said simply. To make sure one good person didn't disappear without knowing they mattered. Those words sat between them like something warm. Mara did not try to respond to them right away. She had learned somewhere in the years of being raised by a woman who understood the weight of language that some sentences deserve to be left alone for a moment. That rushing to answer something true and important is a way of not fully receiving it. So she sat with it. And to make sure one good person didn't disappear without knowing they mattered, she thought about Rosario reading that lawyer's letter in 2002, sitting at the kitchen table on Cypress Avenue, in the apartment with the blue curtains and the crucifix and the photograph of Mara at age 7. Reading those words, I hope the world feels a little lighter. And knowing. Just knowing. The way Rosario always knew things, quietly and completely without needing them explained. And then folding the letter up. And never saying a word, not to anyone. For 17 years. Mara looked down at her lap. The 4 pages of Rosario's letter sat folded there. Beside them, the second envelope, crisp, official, gold embossed, waited with its own set of answers inside. She had almost forgotten about it. She picked it up. It felt heavier than it looked. Or maybe that was just her hands, still trembling slightly, making everything feel more significant than it was. She turned it over. The seal was clean and unbroken. Whatever was inside had been waiting, undisturbed for her. She looked at the man beside her. He was watching her hands, not impatiently. Just watching the way you watch, when you already know what something contains and you are waiting to see how another person receives it. That was when she understood that he knew exactly what was in the envelope. She broke the seal. Inside was a single typed page, clean and precise, on the formal letterhead of a legal foundation. She read the name of the foundation at the top of the page, and her breath caught in her throat like a hook. The Rosario Fund. She read the page once. Then she looked up at him. Then she read it again, slower, in making sure she was not misreading words the way she had misread numbers in Gerald Fitch's office that afternoon. She was not misreading anything. You created a foundation, she said. Her voice came out strange, thin and wondering, like the voice of someone speaking from a very high place. In her name. A few years ago, yes. It supports grandmothers. She looked at the page in her hands. Grandmothers who are raising grandchildren by themselves, who are working multiple jobs, who are... She stopped. She had to stop for a moment. She pressed her lips together and breathed through her nose and counted to 4 the way Rosario had taught her. Who are doing what should be impossible, she said finally. And doing it anyway. Yes, he said. Simply. Without decoration. Mara stared at the letterhead. The Rosario Fund. Her grandmother's name. In clean, formal type. On official foundation paper. Carrying the weight of a legal institution, a board of directors, an annual budget, a staff of people who went to work every morning in the name of a woman who had worked the night shift cleaning offices and never once complained about tired feet. How many families? Mara asked. She needed a number. She needed something concrete to hold on to while the rest of her tried to process what was happening. So far, he thought for a moment, about 230 families. Give or take a few new applications this month. Mara put the letter down on her knee. She stared out at the wet street. 230 families. 230 sets of children who had someone fighting for them. Someone paying a bill, covering a school fee, and keeping a light on. Partly entirely because one small woman in a house dress had looked at a sad stranger on a bench and decided she had 40 minutes to spare. The circle. Rosario had talked about the circle her entire life. It was perhaps her most repeated idea, the one she returned to so often that Mara, as a teenager, had developed the habit of finishing the sentence before her grandmother could. What you give out goes around the world and comes back different. Always bigger. Always better. Mara used to nod and think, "Yes, abuela, of course. Very nice." She had thought it was the kind of thing grandmothers said, warm and well-meaning and not entirely connected to how the actual world worked. She understood now, sitting on a cold, wet step on West 72nd Street at almost 9 o'clock at night, that it had not been a saying at all. It had been a description, a precise, accurate, first-hand account of something Rosario had watched happen in real time and had never told a single soul about. Mara looked at the man beside her. He was watching the street again, that same calm, outward gaze. He was not waiting for her to thank him. He was not sitting with the posture of someone who had done something grand and was aware of how grand it was. He was just sitting, present and unhurried, the same way he had been sitting when she first walked up. The same way, she now understood, he had probably been sitting on that bench in Central Park in the spring of 2002 when a small woman in a house dress had decided to sit beside him. "Why did you come here tonight?" Mara asked. She needed to ask it. She felt like the answer mattered in a way she hadn't fully understood yet. "I'm the real reason," she added. He was quiet for a moment. "Because I've been reading the news," he said, "and watching people. And I've been feeling lately like kindness is becoming rarer. Like people have stopped seeing each other as people. Like we walk past each other more than we walk toward each other." He turned the ruined cardboard sign over once in his hands. "I wanted to test it." 416 people walked past, Mara said. "Yes." She let a beat of silence pass. "And one stopped," she said. "One always stops." She looked at him steadily. "That's not a cold world. That's just how it has always been. You don't need everyone. You never needed everyone." She watched the words land on him. "My grandmother told you that," Mara said quietly. "On that bench. In different words, she told you exactly that." He looked at her. Something in his face shifted. Something that had been held tight and carefully for a long time began, slowly and visibly, to loosen. "She did," he said. Mara folded the foundation letter carefully and held it together with Rosario's 4 pages, all of it pressed between her palms like something she intended to keep close for a very long time. "She was right then," Mara said. "She's still right now." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Some things, Rosario had always said, don't need words at the end. Some things you just let sit there and be true. They sat like that for a while, not talking, not filling the silence with anything unnecessary. Just 2 people on wet stone steps, holding the particular quiet that comes after something true has been said and received and allowed to settle properly into the ground. Above them, the clouds were beginning to separate, not dramatically, not the way clouds part in movies with sudden moonlight and orchestral swelling. Just slowly, tiredly, the way clouds move when a storm has spent itself and has nothing left to prove. A strip of dark blue sky appeared over the park. Then another. The streetlights found the wet pavement below and made it shine like the inside of something precious. Mara was the first to speak. "Nobody knows, do they?" she said. "About the foundation, about Rosario, about any of it." He looked at her sideways. "No," he said. "Not your friends, not your team. No." She thought about that, about what it meant to carry something good in complete silence for years. Not out of shame, not out of secrecy, but out of a genuine belief that the doing of it was the whole point. And that telling people would change what it was into something else entirely. She had always thought that kind of quiet was impossible. That people, all people, eventually needed someone to know their good things. Needed the acknowledgement, the witness. Rosario had not needed it, and neither, apparently, had he. The world had spent years puzzling over Keanu Reeves, over the particular texture of his public life, the choices that didn't add up by Hollywood arithmetic, to how famous people were supposed to behave. Journalists had written articles about it. Fans had made it into something close to mythology. She had read some of those pieces herself, in the waiting rooms and late nights of her ordinary life, and had found them charming but incomplete. Like people describing a building from the outside and guessing at the rooms, he had given away an almost incomprehensible amount of his earnings from The Matrix. $75 million by most accounts, to the costume department and the special effects crew. The people behind the curtain, the ones whose names scroll past at the end while most of the audience is already putting on their coats. When reporters asked him why he gave short answers, he deflected with humor. He changed the subject with the easy grace of someone who had decided long ago that the question itself was missing the point. He rode the subway in New York when he was in the city. Not occasionally, not as a stunt, regularly, naturally the way a person rides the subway because it is the most direct way to get from one place to another, and the company of strangers has never bothered him. There were photographs of him standing in packed subway cars, giving his seat to other passengers without being asked. Not looking around to see if anyone noticed. Just standing, holding the rail, looking at nothing in particular, perfectly comfortable being nobody special in a car full of people. The world had called it quirky, endearing, unusual. It was none of those things. Mara understood now what it actually was. It was practice. Deliberate, daily, ongoing practice in the art of being a person among people. Of not floating away into the untouchable atmosphere where money and fame tried, constantly to place him. Of staying connected to the specific feeling of standing on a platform, waiting for a train, being cold, being tired, being just a body in the world like every other body around him. Rosario had done the same thing her entire life. She had never had money or fame pulling her upward, but she had had exhaustion. She had had grief. She had had every reason the world offers a person to close inward, to spend what little energy remained only on herself, to stop looking at strangers as people worth stopping for. She had never stopped, and she had passed that refusal, that stubborn, loving refusal to stop seeing people, to a granddaughter who had walked through rain tonight and looked up at exactly the right moment. Mara turned to him. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I want you to know you don't have to answer it." "Okay," he said. She looked at him carefully. "The sign," she said. "You told me it was for Douglas, the veteran, and I believe I believe that was real." She paused. But there was something else tonight too, wasn't there? Something you were carrying out here that had nothing to do with Douglas." He was still. The strip of dark blue sky above the park had widened. A single star had appeared in it, pale and uncertain, like it wasn't sure yet if the clouds were really done. He looked at his hands. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his dark jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not official, not typed. Just a piece of notepaper folded in quarters, slightly worn at the creases the way paper gets when it has been folded and unfolded and refolded many times. Like something read more than once. Like something carried for a long time. He held it for a moment without speaking. Then he held it out to her. "This came to me 6 weeks ago," he said. "Through my lawyer. I from another lawyer." He paused. "I've been carrying it every day since. I didn't know what to do with it." Mara looked at the folded paper in his outstretched hand. Her heart was doing something loud and irregular inside her chest. 6 weeks ago, the same week Rosario died. She took the paper, she unfolded it, and the handwriting that looked back at her from the page was the same, careful, old-fashioned, unhurried cursive that had signed her permission slips, and her birthday cards and the letter currently pressed between her palms. Mara's eyes moved across the page slowly, not because the words were difficult, because she needed to read them the way you need to look at something beautiful and painful at the same time. Carefully, completely, without rushing past any of it. The date at the top was October 14th, 2019, in 3 weeks before Rosario died. She had written this while she still could, while her hands were still steady enough to press a pen firmly into paper and make every letter deliberate and clear. Mara could picture her at the kitchen table in the blue curtained apartment, in the early morning before the light got strong, writing the way she did everything, with total concentration without hurry, like the task in front of her was the only task in the world. She read every word. Dear Keanu, I don't know if this will reach you. I gave it to my lawyer with instructions to find a way. Lawyers are good at finding ways when you ask them firmly enough, and I have never had trouble being firm. I am dying. Please don't be sad about that. I am 81 years old, and I have had a life so full that it has been embarrassing, frankly, how much goodness I have been given. I am not afraid. I am only thinking, as people do at the end, about the ones who mattered. You mattered. You still do. I want you to know something. I knew who you were that afternoon on the bench. I recognized your face from the first moment I sat down. I had seen your films. I knew your name. And I made a decision very quickly and very deliberately that what you needed that day was not someone who knew your name. You needed a person. So I tried to be only that. I have watched you from a distance in the years since. I saw what you did with the money from your films. The crew members, the quiet ones, the ones the cameras never find. I saw the photographs of you on the subway, sitting beside regular people, standing so others could sit. I saw what the newspapers called Sad Keanu. And I want you to know that I looked at those photographs and I did not see sadness. I saw a man who never forgot where sadness lives. That is a different thing entirely. That is a gift, though it rarely feels like one. You told me that afternoon that you didn't know what you were for. I think you know now. But I want to say it plainly because some things need to be said plainly by someone who is old enough not to be embarrassed about it. You are for this, for sitting down, for staying present, for seeing the person right in front of you when the whole world is moving too fast to look. You are for continuing the circle. Don't stop riding the subway. Don't stop sitting on benches. Don't stop being the person in the room who notices the person no one else is noticing. The world needs you to do that. Quietly, consistently, without announcement. Far more than it needs anything else you could give it. One more thing. I have a granddaughter. Her name is Mara. She is 26 years old, and she is the greatest thing I ever did, though I did nothing except love her and stay. She does not know about the bench or the fund or any of it. She will find out when I am gone because I am a dramatic old woman, and I have arranged things accordingly. If the world is as small and as circular as I believe it is, your path and hers will cross. If it does, please sit with her for a little while. She is going to need someone to. I love you, though we only met once. I decided long ago that this is allowed. You can love someone for 40 minutes if those 40 minutes were completely real. Rosario Solano, October 14th, 2019. Mara read the last line. Then she sat very still on the cold stone step and let the letter rest open in her lap and stared at the wet street in front of her without seeing any of it. She was thinking about her grandmother at that kitchen table. Writing this, sealing it, handing it to a lawyer with firm instructions. Doing all of that while she was dying, while her body was giving up its long and extraordinary effort, while there was every reason in the world to spend whatever energy remained only on herself. Still arranging things. Still thinking about other people. Still, even at the very end, tending to the circle. Mara pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. She held it there for a moment, very tightly until she was sure she could speak without her voice breaking into pieces. Then she lowered her hand. She folded the letter carefully along its original creases. The worn ones. The ones made by his hands, folding and unfolding it every day for 6 weeks, carrying it everywhere the way you carry something you don't know what to do with but cannot put down. She held it out to him. He shook his head. She wrote it so you could find it, he said, and bring it back to me in person. He looked at her. She knew you would. She arranged it that way on purpose. Mara felt the laugh and the sob arrive at exactly the same moment and collide somewhere in the middle of her chest. She planned all of this, she said, her voice half broken and half wondering. She was dying and she planned this whole entire thing. She knew you would come back to this neighborhood. She knew I would walk this way. She knew... She stopped. She looked at him. Yeah, and she sat with you for 40 minutes in 2002, Mara said, slowly. And in 40 minutes she figured out exactly who you were. Not your name, you. And she built all of this, the circle, the letter, the foundation, all of it. She built it around one afternoon on a bench. He was looking at the single star visible above the park. It had been joined now by two others, pale and growing stronger as the clouds continued their slow retreat. She was remarkable, he said. She was a laundry worker, Mara said, who cleaned offices at night, who raised a child alone on Cypress Avenue in the Bronx. She paused. Who sat with a stranger on a bench? Yes, he said. He turned to look at her. That's what remarkable looks like, he said. I almost always. Mara held both letters against her chest, her grandmother's 4 pages and the one meant for him, and pressed them close, the way you hold something you are terrified of losing, something you need to keep inside yourself where nothing can take it. Above them the sky was clearing. Below them the city glittered, wet and alive and enormous and full of people walking past each other in the dark, most of them never stopping, all of them carrying things nobody else could see. And on a stone step on West 72nd Street, 2 of those people sat together in the new quiet after rain, held there by the invisible thread of one woman's extraordinary, ordinary love. Spring came early to the Bronx that year. By the second week of March 2020, the trees on Cypress Avenue were already thinking about leaves. Small, tight buds had appeared on the branches overnight, the way hope appears sometimes. Quietly while you were sleeping, so that you wake up and find the world has shifted without asking permission. The air still had cold in it, but the cold had changed its character. It was thin now, temporary, the kind of cold that knows it is losing. Mara stood on the sidewalk outside a small building 1 block from the apartment where Rosario had raised her, and she looked up at the wall. The mural was finished. It had taken Tomas Guerrero 11 days. He was 22 years old, born and raised 6 blocks away, the eldest of 4 children whose grandmother had been one of the first families supported by the Rosario Fund, 3 years before his grandmother even knew the fund existed. Back when it was still just a quiet arrangement between a lawyer and an anonymous donor, before it had a name or a building or a mural on its wall. Tomas had never been told who funded the fund. He knew only what everyone in the neighborhood eventually came to know in pieces. That a woman named Rosario Solano had, through some combination of grace and mystery, made it possible. That she had been a laundry worker and a night cleaner, and a grandmother who believed in circles. He had painted the mural from that alone. It showed a park bench. Simple and green, the kind found all over Central Park, with the slatted back and the curved armrest worn smooth by 1,000 people sitting on them over the years. On the bench were 2 figures. On the left, a small older woman in a house dress, her hands folded in her lap, her face turned toward the person beside her with an expression that was not pity and not charity, but something more precise and more rare. The expression of someone who has chosen, deliberately and completely, to be present. On the right, a younger man, dark hair, dark jacket, his face turned toward her. In his eyes, if you stood close enough to the wall to really look, Tomas had painted something that took most people a moment to identify. It was the specific expression of a person who has just been reminded that they are not invisible. Between them, in the gap of bench where no one sat, Tomas had painted light. Not sunshine, not a halo. Just light. Warm and sourceless and spreading outward from that small space between 2 people toward the edges of the wall, as though the act of sitting together generated something that could not be contained. Mara looked at it for a long time. She had seen it in progress, had stopped by each of the 11 days to watch it grow. But finished in the early spring morning light, it was different. It was complete in the way that only true things are complete. Not perfect, not without rough edges, but whole. Fully itself. She heard footsteps behind her. She did not turn around right away. A small girl appeared at her side. She was perhaps 6 years old, wearing a bright yellow raincoat with the hood pushed back, walking beside a woman who moved the way Rosario had moved. Carefully, yet with the deliberate energy of someone who has learned to spend themselves wisely. The girl looked up at the mural. She studied it the way children study things they find genuinely interesting, with her whole face without self-consciousness. "Why is that man sad?" she asked her grandmother. The grandmother looked at the painted figure on the bench, at the dark hair and the dark jacket and the eyes that held something enormous and quiet. "He's not sad, baby," she said. "He's waiting." "For what?" The grandmother smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind built from a long time of knowing something that cannot be explained quickly. "For someone kind to sit down," she said. The girl thought about this with great seriousness. Then she looked away from the mural and toward the real woman standing beside her on the sidewalk. Mara, who had not moved, who was still looking up at the two painted figures and the light between them. The girl walked over to her. She sat down on the front step of the building below the mural, folding her small legs carefully. She looked up at Mara. "You can sit too," she said. "If you want, I'll stay with you." Mara looked down at her. At this small girl in a yellow raincoat on a March morning on Cypress Avenue, 1 block from the apartment with the blue curtains, in the neighborhood where a woman had worked 2 jobs and braided hair on Sundays, and believed in circles until the very last page of her life. Mara sat down. They sat together on the step, while the spring light moved over the Bronx and the buds tightened on the trees, and the city made its enormous, indifferent, beautiful noise all around them. After a while, the girl said, "What are we waiting for?" Mara looked at the painted light on the wall. "Nothing," she said. "We're not waiting for anything." The girl seemed satisfied with this. They stayed a little longer. 416 people walked past a man in the rain. 1 stopped. 1 is always enough. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching this from. It could be a small town, a big city, or somewhere in between. We genuinely want to know because this story is proof that kindness lives everywhere. In every neighborhood, on every street, in every person who chooses to look up instead of walking past. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you think of someone who sat with you when you needed it, or someone you wish you had stopped for, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells the world that stories like this one matter. And if you believe that one person can change everything, that one moment of kindness can travel 20 years and touch 200 families and end up painted on a wall in the Bronx, then subscribe to this channel, because that is exactly what we are here for. Every single video, every single story. We find the moments the world almost missed, and we make sure they do not disappear. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, not tomorrow. Today, because somewhere out there, right now, there is a person sitting in the rain holding a sign. And maybe the someone who stops is you. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is waiting, and trust us, you do not want to walk past this one either.